welcome to another episode of A Wicked Parley. I'm your host, Justin, and my fellow co-host, Rose.
Hello, everybody.
Today is going to be an interesting day where I'm going to essentially discuss all the issues that I think of when I think about video games. And as you couldn't tell, I like retro games. But not just retro games, necessarily, but like all games. But before we get into too many of the topics at hand, I would like to discuss a few things. The first thing I want to talk about is the fact that the channel does do Twitch live streams on Sundays. And we don't get that many viewers, but hopefully we get a few more. Hopefully we can grow on that particular platform. It would be great to see anybody who has been following the show or checking it out. We'd love to see you guys there. We kind of cover a whole bunch of different games in that particular thing, and most of them are kind of just Let's Plays, but I am very much open to suggestions. So if there are games you guys want to see us play, we're happy to take any suggestion that you have. Also on Twitter, we have questions of the day, things like that. And while we've gotten a couple responses, I haven't seen as many people respond as much as I'd like. And so I hope that if you guys have the time, if you guys just want to check it out, and if you have any suggestions, once again, open to suggestions, and also share it with your friends and family. I mean, if they don't want to watch the show, maybe they can at least participate on Twitter. After all, it's just a quick second. And then we are starting to put out content on Patreon. So basically, any of the game footage that gets captured will be saved and put on Patreon. Also, I'm doing article reviews for various scientific journals and things like that that relate to psychology and things that I just find interesting in general. Where I'll read, give a little bit of commentary. They're kind of short, so if you don't like a long episode, that might be something that you might be interested in. And also, on Wednesday, we have a very special surprise for you guys. We have a interview episode where I interview a pretty good friend of mine. And we have a good on discussion, so it'll be a little bit different than the typical episodes that you normally see on Wednesdays. And so hopefully you guys look forward to seeing that. All right, and on other news, I'm actually looking to try and get some more guests to be able to come and talk on the show. And if you feel like you might want to be a guest, or you have a person that you think could be a good guest, feel free to email the show with an idea of something that you might want to talk about, or your friend might be interested in talking about. Or if you just feel like, hey, I just want to be part of one of the Wicked Councils, where we kind of talk about random things, feel free. I mean, I don't mind. But definitely looking for some participation in that particular front. So if you want to, definitely shoot us an email. You can be found at wickedparley@gmail.com. All right, now that we've gotten all that little fun shenanigans out of the way, we can get into the main meat and potatoes of tonight's episode. And without going into too much things, can you throw up real quick the list of topics we have, or maybe go over the list of topics we have for tonight?
I don't think we put that as a slideshow.
No, I don't think we did we? So, do you want to go ahead and read them off, the topics?
Yeah. We are going to be talking about microtransactions. We're going to be talking about video game content, such as the differences between different generations of games.
This potentially could be interesting.
Yeah. And then we're also going to be talking about what goes on behind the scenes when it comes to the programmers and their essential work environment.
Yes.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I mean, like, those poor people. My God.
Yeah. We're also going to be talking about console shortages. I can think of one.
I still don't have my PS5. Why? Okay. Anyways.
There it went.
Sorry.
And let's see. We have the fear of missing out. Mm-hmm. And if we have time to talk about it today, sexism in video games, and rehashing the whole idea that violent video games don't actually cause violent acts.
Yes.
If we have the time for those last two.
That's true. Yeah, and also, just because, why not make it as difficult on us as we possibly can? We're also going to be throwing up a video game for you guys to be able to watch me play as I kind of play through the beginning part of it a little bit while we're having this discussion. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and switch over to that, huh?
Yeah.
All right. I can't see anything. There you go. Okay, cool.
Now you can.
Yay! All right. Knife. Woohoo.
Very much knifey knife.
Yeah, stat. All right, so let's cut into microtransactions as a topic. So when it comes to microtransactions, the first thing we should probably define is what exactly is a microtransaction. Now, this may be redundant information to many of our viewers here, and maybe some might be like, hey, this could be interesting information we pass on, but just bear with us, okay? Because we don't know who's ever going to watch this in the future. So, a microtransaction, in its gist, is a payment, often multiple times, that lets you get some level of content in a video game. Often it's a gacha-based system, which means that it's kind of like a random pool for some sort of equipment or character that you have to pay a certain amount of money for to get a certain set of pools. This can be other things too, like for instance, in Destiny, they have a thing called the Test Everest store, where cosmetics are sold. Fortnite has got something very similar, and it's a terrible thing. A lot of mobile games typically use
oh yeah, definitely.
this model because it's easier for them to get a large group of people interested in playing their game without having a huge cost to entry. But now that definition, for the most part, has been kind of put forth, and we've kind of like thrown out a little bit more than I intended. Rose, so when it comes to microtransactions, it sounds like you might have a little bit of experience with this particular thing. What do you think of them?
Anybody who knows me knows I'm not too fond of them. I'm what's known as a F2P. It's a free-to-play. As in, if at all possible, I will avoid spending any sort of money on microtransactions. The only amount of money I spend is to get the actual game cartridge itself for most of the console games. But I have friends who wholly participate in using microtransactions, usually for the gacha system, as you said, but sometimes these microtransactions are really the only way to continue the storyline, which honestly really irritates me. It's one thing if it's like a bonus to the game to like add a little bit of extra flair, such as with the Among Us game. Mm-hmm. You get the original game for a set price, and then if you want like decorative items such as hats or certain skins or pets, then you can, buy those packages, and those are kind of similar to microtransactions, I suppose. But it's not like they're necessary for the gameplay. It's not like they're necessary for you to have fun. So I can understand those types of microtransactions, and I support those because they support the creator if it actually goes to the creator, which is another story.
Yeah, it's not always the case.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, that's another thing we're going to rip into later.
We'll get into it a little bit. I mean, honestly, like, when we first were talking about this, like this subject in general, was that like it was kind of like the Peter Griffin, what grinds my gears kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's just like I hate so much about what people do when it comes to certain like games and developers that we had to expand it to just beyond microtransactions because there were so many things, so many concepts that I wanted to cover that we couldn't cover in a single episode or even really in a single section. So it's like. Yeah. So, anyways, spiel about microtransactions that I personally hate. Okay, so the first thing that I kind of like associate when it comes to a microtransaction, and I could be wholly wrong when it comes to this, but to me, whenever a microtransaction gets done, I almost feel like it incentivizes the company to continue making games that are modeled this way. And so you end up having a market that consists almost entirely of these, half games or these shells of games that in order to play them to their completion, you have to pay hundreds of dollars at the end of the day to get all the content that they offer. And to me, this is just like a travesty because I don't know about you, but I have played a lot of games over my life. I mean, I'm a '90s kid, and so I got exposed to the Super Nintendo, the Sega Genesis, the Dreamcast, the N64, the PlayStation. I say PlayStation 1. and I have played lots of consoles ever since around that particular time frame. So I've seen a pretty diverse set of gameplay, of offerings when it comes to different game platforms. And I can definitely say that like the format of the free-to-play model, while is very admirable, I think ultimately is a shame because you shouldn't have to. That shouldn't be the only type of experience that you have, and yet it seems to be ever more prevailing model, or at least some version of it. And so, like, to me, like, I absolutely detest those kinds of things, because like I miss the days where you could just go into a game store, all right, and you bought a game, whether it would be a cartridge, a disc. It was kind of like, it doesn't matter. It was a game. It was a game, and it was the whole game. You know, when I first got Halo 2, all right, like I got the whole fucking game. You know, I didn't have to pay full price for part of it. Like, I got the whole game. And now, you know, if you try to get a game and you want the whole game, it's almost laughable, like how little you actually get for it.
Yeah.
I mean, have you ever had that experience where you bought a game and then you realize, oh shit, I have to buy like X number of expansions or microtransactions in order to actually get, you know, a game, like the full game?
The only game that would come close to that for me would be Pokemon Sword and Shield, because the expansion packs the expanded DLC added quite a bit to make the game like better. Like, obviously you had the main plotline, but in order to get to the real fun stuff, you had to get the DLC, which was essentially another copy of the game, what it seemed like.
Jeez. Yeah. I actually didn't buy the expansions for that reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, I protested with my wallet. And
You protested. Your wallet said no.
Yeah,
Your wallet went on strike.
Yeah, my mind and my wallet both were like, yeah, no, fuck this.
Like, so that's for like single player games, but how do you think microtransactions affect multiplayer games?
Okay, so, all right. There's a lot of different things I could say about that. So it depends, first of all, on the degree by which we're talking here. Are we talking like microtransactions in the sense that they provide cosmetics, or is this actual content?
Okay, let's just do one case at a time.
Okay.
What about the cosmetics, since that, in my opinion, might be the easiest to talk about?
I mean, to me, I think they're all pretty easy to talk about. At least for me,
okay.
from my perspective, I think that they're all anybody who engages in microtransactions is a piece of garbage. So like
the content creators or the people who buy them?
Both. I mean, like if you go out of your, I mean, like, and that means I'm a piece of garbage because I've bought many games, you know, like I said, and I'm okay with admitting that, by the way, just so you know. But no, truthfully, it's like this. Like, you support that particular thing by purchasing the game, all right? If you didn't purchase the game, developers wouldn't make the game. They'd have no one to sell it to, so they wouldn't basically continue this system of providing that kind of content. So I blame the developers. I blame the people who purchased the stuff, and I'm involved in that. I'm not going to say I'm not, because I am. But just because I am doesn't mean I'm not also painfully aware of just how much we get.
Better
abused.
painfully aware than ignorant.
I mean, yes and no.
Yes and no.
Yes and no. I mean, like, if you're painfully aware but do nothing, how are you different than someone who's ignorant of it? I mean, I would almost say that you're kind of more irresponsible. Which, you know what? In some ways, maybe I'm trying to redeem myself by talking about it myself. Like, maybe I'm like secretly just being like, you know what? I realize I have gravely messed up. Perhaps maybe if I talk about it, it'll be okay. I'll make it better. So I don't know.
Okay, so how do you feel about using microtransactions for, besides, them being not likable in your opinion and like scum? How do you feel about, using the microtransactions in multiplayer games for cosmetics versus like actual content and gameplay?
Well, here's the thing about that, right? Like, I mean, there are some people who are completionists who will play a game and they'll go, okay, I want every achievement, I want every item, I want every single thing. Now, in some games, like, I'm going to use Destiny because I've played Destiny for a very long time. All right, I am a major offender of the whole I spent way too much money on one fucking game. All right, like I am definitely, you can I can be blamed for that 100%, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to be like, yeah, no, I'm innocent now. I'm very much guilty. And the reason why I say it like that is because, in that game, if you're trying to be a completionist, you're going to spend probably around $2,000.
Gosh,
Like
that sounds like so much.
I would, yeah, it is a lot considering the game costs $60, right?
Yeah.
And like, there's another topic we're going to talk about later that's going to jump into other reasons why that particular model is problematic. But I think my primary issue stems from the notion that it's just, if you're a completionist, you cannot possibly get all the content that's offered, and I think that itself is problematic because you're basically paying for a service that ultimately you're being denied. And while if you wanted to defend the position of Destiny in the sense that, oh yeah, it's totally fine because like they have a system where you can technically randomly get a piece of thing every now and then. It's like, do you realize how long you'd have to play the game in order to be able to do that? Versus just being like, oh cool, I get it right away with my wallet. It's like, okay, this is not fair. This is not fair. And yeah, so like that's at least that's my what I gotta say about that particular part. So, did you want to hear what I had to say about the other one, the pay to win?
Yeah, I mean that's one way to put it, I guess.
I mean that's basically what it is, right? I mean
yeah, if you get like certain training maps or certain units from like paying for them and they're like fundamentally better.
I mean, like, what else could that possibly describe as? How? First of all, let's just say this: how could it not be that?
Yeah.
Like
A lot of games seem to do that. Like, if you have the money and you get the units, just like all of a sudden you're at the top of the charts, and there's no way for free to play people to really be on the top of those charts unless they're playing 24/7.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'll give you a great example of a game that is like that. Genshin Impact. Okay, now I play this game a lot. Now I would what you call probably like mostly free to play. I mean, I've heard the notion by one of my friends calling me a dolphin because I spend $5 a month on the game. Like,
yeah, the dolphin whale system, yeah.
Yeah. So like, I mean, maybe I'm considered that, and that way I'm lightly there. But like, I don't view $5 as that bad considering other things that I've done.
Yeah, it's like in comparison to.
It's
other
like,
things,
you know,
it
when
doesn't
I
seem
look
that
at
much.
when I look
It's
at
like a coffee
Destiny,
at Starbucks.
Yeah, exactly. Like when I look at Destiny, it's like I bought a Destiny Edition console. I bought every single expansion on 4 different platforms. Like, I just, it's more like, I would say I have a Destiny addiction at this point. Like, it's like, I have like, literally, I'm trying to wean myself off.
Getting all those microtransactions can't really seem like that, can you?
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, microtransactions definitely promote an addictive personality type, and I am one of those people that is addictive. Personality type. I mean, honestly, if I find something I love, it's like, yeah, we're just gonna keep on playing and playing and playing until it loses its luster. And sometimes it just doesn't lose its luster until it's really too late.
Yeah.
So, like, when it comes to Genshin Impact, what I'm trying to get at with that is that Genshin Impact is a game where you have, a set number of characters, and those set number of characters come, basically guaranteed, like as you play it to the beginning of the story. Then if you want more powerful characters, you have to go through a pool system, a gacha, where you have a very small percentage chance of getting a very high rated character, and then you have a really not so very likely chance of getting a pretty good character, and then you have a pretty good chance of getting basically nothing. Like,
just material for like experience.
Yeah. And so, like, you're incentivized to purchase things in the game. Now, unless you're an incredibly lucky player like myself, and I say that like literally not joking at all. Like, I am beyond lucky in that game. I've gotten more 5 stars than a couple of my friends who have been playing the game since it came out and have pulled hundreds of times. And I've got like maybe 140, 150 pulls in. And I have like almost all the same stuff they got. Plus more. It's obnoxious. I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it. But like, if I was a person who's like, I'm going to do exactly what you did, I'm going to get the same number of characters, I had to spend money. One of my friends calculated that it would be approximately $1,000 for what my account is.
Whoa.
And I'm like, I did that for free. So it just kind of shows how random it can be.
Mm-hmm.
But it also, I mean, like, I believe you play the game, right?
Yeah.
Now, what has your experience been at pulling 5-star characters, which is the highest rarity currently in the game?
I only have one.
Yeah. How many times you pulled?
I'd say 100 as well.
100 as well? Okay, yeah. So she's pulled 100, and I pulled, roughly about, about almost twice as much as she has, right? But I have, let's see here, last count, I think I have like 11 5-star like stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's ridiculous. It's just like it's ridiculous. It's bad because it's not even my account. It's like my friends have literally asked me to pull for them on their accounts, and I just pull 5-star characters from them when they like on like the first or second try, and they're like, "What the fuck? I've been trying for so long." And there's a pity system which we could get into if we really need to.
Nah.
But I've done it without the pity system. So like it just shows how random that can be and how unfair it is, because like somebody like who's unlucky could pay hundreds of dollars to do the same thing that someone who is lucky can do with free or very like low amounts of money.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I think that like any game that fosters that particular design needs to be really seriously looked at and probably redone in that particular way, because is that really the kind of experience you want to promote? I don't think it is. So.
Yeah, elective systems like that are just, they are rage-inducing.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But I think that's all we really want to cover for microtransactions right now.
For right now, there are a couple other things. Actually, there's one more thing I actually want to get to before we go on to the next one. And I want to discuss when it comes to the pressure behind developers. All right, like I kind of briefly skimmed this, but I want to kind of go into a little bit more depth when it comes to this. So, if you think about like the culture behind the way in which games get developed, right?
Mm-hmm.
The game that sells the most, that sells like you get the most amount of stuff for doing that particular thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to sell more copies of your game if it's cheaper, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I briefly mentioned the fact that like if you were to have a free-to-play game that has a microtransaction system built in, then it is able to be distributed across multiple platforms and to a wider audience because it's got a lower bar to entry to play, which is going to incentivize people to at least give the game a try. Now, if you think about the way in which that interacts with developers might be forced to fall into that particular system, and you might see a whole hell of a lot of games take up that space. But the part that I think that is kind of messed up, and the part that we're going to discuss in a little bit later segment, has to do with what happens to the programmers. But when it comes to the developer ideology, you have to imagine that if they have to do what works. And if what works is a microtransaction system, then we're basically shaping the way in which the entire system works based off an entire subsect of things that people don't even like. So now we get into a system where we're making games that people start to enjoy, but we're blocking off the content behind paywalls so that way people are being forced to either pay that money or not be able to enjoy the game. So really, who are the games being developed for at the end of the day? My argument would be it is the people who make money off of those games, the CEOs and big wigs in the given corporations.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get into the next section, are there any comments that you might want to read from there?
Yeah.
Any opinions?
There are a couple that come in for this section. Kyle hypothesizes that it might be like microtransactions are a type of power creep, having to buy new products to keep up with everyone else, which we kind of covered with the pay to win.
Yeah. Which
And then-
we'll also get into. We'll get into the whole FOMO thing, which ties into that a little bit later.
Yeah, and then all the essential small payments rather than the big large payment to get the full game.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle makes the comment that I think companies would rather have people make 10 payments of $2 up than charge $2 up front. Or $20 up front. I don't know.
Maybe.
Maybe. People seem to like doing it in payments because they're smaller. They seem smaller.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. And then they made a comparison to the Sims series, and I'm like, as soon as I read that comment earlier, I'm like, don't get me started on Sims. Let's see. And then... A question that Kyle brought up is when we were talking about microtransactions to essentially, finish or upgrade the game and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe the question was, do you support the right to refuse upgrades?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Oh yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, honestly, like I think that like the idea behind, like Destiny for a really long time was kind of like under the community who supported the idea of occasional expansions because they were like, well, we want to have content, we don't want to have nothing to play, and we don't mind the transactions as long as we get something out of it. But when you get the situation that kind of unfolds with Destiny, where it's basically we get into a system where we have to basically repay for an entire fucking game every couple of years, it's like that's it's kind of ridiculous. And so I think that like those models don't really work all that well, like in the main. Oh my gosh, what the hell's going on here? Just getting
They don't really work in the main.
Yeah, they don't really work in the main structure because you end up having a system where people ultimately can't afford it anyways. So like, okay, so what would you say to somebody who's like, let's say who's 15 or 16, right? You're gonna say they just can't play the game for like a couple of years until they get a job. When in the past, a person in that particular age group, maybe they had a birthday, maybe they bought a game, or maybe they were gifted a game, and now they're able to access that game and play it freely. Now you're gonna section off an entire subsect of your population and limit them only to those who can afford it, or have parents who can afford to provide those particular updates, which if you think about it aren't really that cheap, especially when you consider the fact that most games require an internet connection to be able to be played. So you have to pay for a monthly internet subscription of some kind, and in order to play any of the decent games nowadays, you have to pay it at a pretty decent premium. I don't know about you guys, but I pay roughly around $100 for my internet, so that's not exactly cheap. All right, that's a monthly thing. Then you got to think about the fact that a lot of games that are played on consoles require a subscription. So you have to have your PlayStation Plus, your Xbox Live, etc., right? And that also can be like $50-$60 a year. So that could be the cost of an entire game. And that's assuming that you do that model and not the good God $10 a month model, which is stupid. If you think about those particular things, and then you think about also having to pay for expansions, for some people who maybe are doing well for themselves, this is an okay system because like, hey, I can afford it. It's not a big deal to me. I mean, I definitely fit in that category. But I know that if I was a teenager, like back when I was a kid, I didn't have 2 quarters to rub together. And so if I was wanting to play in something like this, I would be forced to wait to go to a friend's house who could afford it. And that's the other thing that we could talk about in another section, which has to do with gameplay and overall content. But I would say that there's a large number of games nowadays that are multiplayer, but only multiplayer to an individual console. So if you wanted to play multiplayer with friends, you're playing online, and you're not doing split screen, you're not doing anything like that. So that's kind of something that's also important to kind of take note of. So, is there any more comments?
There are, but I think it's like 9:30 at the moment, and we have like 4 more sections to really go through.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we're
So I'm gonna keep a track of these and save them for a potential return.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, we are not trying to ignore you guys.
No, not trying to at all. It's just we want to make sure we get our overview before we go into like an hour and a half.
Yeah, no. Like,
no thanks.
If the episode goes like 5 or 10 minutes over an hour, I'm gonna be okay with it. Honestly.
Yeah, that's fine. However,
but we can't be going into like the 2-hour territory like we used to do. Only because I don't think anyone wants to watch, me suck at this game for 2 hours and also talk about video game rants. It's like, I mean, like, if you guys want to, I mean, like, I guess we probably could.
Maybe later.
Another day.
Anyway.
That's what the Twitch is for, so,
Yeah, that's what the Twitch stream is for. That goes on for 2 hours.
Yeah,
so
you want
to hear him rant?
Yeah, and if you want to send in questions or something like that, like, to the show, I mean, I will happily respond to questions that you may have from here on there. So, Anyways, let's get into the next one, which was the difference.
The next one is about actually video game content. Speaking of which, the differences between generations.
Mm-hmm.
So, just for a start-off question, do you think games nowadays are essentially more in-depth or less in-depth than before?
I think it depends. I think it depends on what game you're playing, what kind of like console setup you're doing. But I would say, largely speaking, the vast majority of games offer less today than a lot of their counterparts did 10, 15 years ago.
Okay, and what makes you say that?
Well, I say that because, let's say, for instance, if you wanted to play a game offline, all right?
Okay.
How many games do you guys have access to that provide you with 20, 30, 40 hours of gameplay offline that you guys would be willing to play and repeatedly play? Where there's a lot of return value there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I always think of like, and I know it's not fair to say it like this because not every game is developed the same way, but like the early like Final Fantasy games, for instance, or early Zelda games, all right? They weren't graphically impressive, but the one thing that really has them, you know, especially like, you know, stand out, especially like A Link to the Past, the Super Nintendo version, was the fact that it had an interesting story, it had a lot of replayability, and it also had a lot of things going on that required a lot of time. It wasn't a chore to hop onto the game and go on an adventure. You know, it wasn't a list of, oh, I need to make sure I have this, 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 and this before I can start playing. It was, you know, you can start off the adventure and you learn things, and then you unlock certain chapters, and you do certain things in a special way, and then it unfolds, and then you get to do that. And it's a series of puzzles. Rather than, like, in Destiny, for instance, of, oh, I guess I gotta kill the monster of the week so many number of times before next week happens. Make sure I get my achievement. It's like, okay. You know, it just doesn't feel the same way.
Daily commissions.
Yeah, exactly. Daily commissions in Genshin is one of them. I remember I play on my phone Vanguard Zero and Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links.
Oh, Animal Crossing.
Animal Crossing is another one of those chore games. Like, and it's just like you know, like it's you're not incentivized to play, which is what I think the goal behind a lot of this stuff is to you know, make you have a reason to turn on. The reason for turning on the game should be the game is fun to play. Like, that should
not
be the
that you
goal.
should go back because like going back daily it helps you get more stuff.
Yeah, it's like you should be able to have fun, and it shouldn't be like all about just resource management. Because at the end of the day, games can have resource management because there is a fun element to that particular thing to be able to kind of develop, foster, you know. I mean, always knew that like I'm the guy who will go grind out for like 100 of something when I only need one, but just to have that 100 because you never know. But at the same time, it's just like that's not like if your game is nothing but that, then it's like that only appeals to a subset of group, and then at some point that becomes old. And so it's like, and then it becomes like, what else does your game offer me? Oh, nothing? Well, I guess I'm going to move on. But they have you locked into these microtransactions often that kind of force you to go, okay, well, you leave our game? Well, cool, you feel bad now. We're going to make you feel bad because you didn't do what we wanted you to do. You spent all this money, so now you're not getting all the rewards for spending your money. It's like, okay, that's not cool. And I don't think that like a lot of people realize that until they like actually like leave a game. Like, you know, they leave a game, they're like, man, I spent a lot of money on that game. I definitely went through that when it came to Destiny. Like, I left Destiny 2 for about a year. And I remember thinking, I'm like, oh, God, at that point I'd spent like $900 in the game. I'm like, okay, all right, wow, we are really in deep now. And I was really feeling bad for like not playing the game because I'm like, I invested all this money and like nothing. And time. So, I mean, like, what do you have any experiences when it comes to older games? Like anything that jumps at you, and you're like, oh man, that's great, like Spyro or Crash or like a Mario game or like.
One of the games that I used to play a lot of in the past was the old-fashioned RuneScape. Oldie. I got back into it a little bit because one of my classmates plays the game pretty often, and I was just like, oh, I remember that game, and I got into it for a month or two, and then it's just like, because it was the whole, you go on daily resource management, that was nothing. And then it's just like, I played it for the nostalgia, but it only kept my attention for so long.
Yeah. It's kind of like, for me, like Oregon Trail. I know that probably sounds like crazy old.
That's an oldie.
But like, you're like, oh man. But like, yes, I played Oregon Trail a long time ago, and it was old when I played it. So like, just like, I'm not that crazy old. But it was a dinosaur when I was playing it as a kid. So, but it's definitely a game that's of resource management a lot, and it's just that would be something I could play for a second, but then it'd become boring. So, I mean, I think that at the end of the day, more games get made nowadays that require internet connections, that require you to have some sort of like subscription, or they have some sort of like, you know, you get part of the game now, then you get part of the game, then you get the other part of the game later, and you got to pay for it later. It's like, I want to pay for the game and get the whole fucking game. Like, I'm tired of like going, okay, I'll buy the game. Oh, guess what? In 6 months, this is going to happen. So now I'm going to look forward to this. It's like, at the same time, it's like, oh shit, I'm looking forward to paying for more game. But I'm paying for the same
Wonderful.
game. It's like, okay. And like, is it more, or is it like, oh, this could have been in the game, but like, it wasn't because I want more money out of you. It's like, what's really going on? So.
Yeah. Like, the amount of games I play, they're mostly single player, so I don't really have to deal with that. But the amount of games I have that require, you know, an online internet connection versus single player is, I would say, 3 to 2.
3 to 2.
3 to 2. It's not 2 to 1 because it's like, I mostly go for single player games, so I might be, you know, an exception. But I still have 3 to 2, and most of the 3 to 2 multiplayer / online games compared to single player, but I still have, you know, 3 out of those 5 games are multiplayer / online.
Well, I mean, like, that makes sense. I mean, like, honestly, like, I have so many games, it's ridiculous. Like,
oh yeah, you've mentioned it before when you would go on that Dimple buying binge.
Yeah, when I bought basically every Xbox, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 game that had come out. Like, ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even before that, I had a pretty massive collection of games. And the thing I always think about is that, like, you know, I spent maybe $3,000 probably on all the games that I have that are before the internet stuff. And I would much rather, I think I get more value out of those particular games, right, than I do from anything that I got to play before.
Fair.
When I've gotten, like, in let's say in the last 5 years, like, you know, how many times has a God of War or a exceptional Call of Duty come out? You know, it's like one, maybe one, and it's like, and how many of them require internet connections? It's like, can you even play these games offline? It's like, some of them, sure, some of them have a couple options. I would say the best games to have come out in the last 5 years are probably the God of War, the 2 Spider-Man games, and that's a tough one after that. It's probably a Pokemon game, you know? Maybe.
But yeah, even though with those subscriptions, it's like, oh, they're gonna build over time too.
Yeah.
So it's like, with the amount of internet subscriptions you need, or game console subscriptions you need, and all that, with the amount of time you play those games, how much is that gonna add up, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not gonna. I don't think anyone's getting their value anymore. I think that's really what it comes down to. It's that, you know, when it comes to what you actually get for what you're actually trying to have, I don't think anyone gets what they actually deserve anymore, and I think that's kind of a shame. Like, think about it like this, right? If you spent, let's say, $60, $70 on a game right now, right?
Okay.
Because I think that's what they're going for, depending on how new the current game is, right?
Yeah.
What's the odds that game you're going to buy you can play offline? What are the odds that game is going to have enough content for you to actually get, let's say, at least 40 hours out of? And what's the likelihood that that particular game is going to even have, like an interesting story? It's like, I mean, like, there's some games that don't even offer stories, but let's assume for a second that most of the games that we talk about do have stories, right? What's the chance of it actually being interesting? Yeah, that's what I am forced to kind of like look at when it comes to those kinds of things. A great example of a game that just pisses me off just thinking about is the Final Fantasy VII remake.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and here's why. When you think you're gonna get a game that's a remake, you're gonna assume that I'm getting the whole fucking game, right? Like I'm getting the whole game. All right, and you want to know how much you get of the current Final Fantasy? Do you think you get the whole game? Do you think you get like half the game?
The fact that you're asking me means it's not the full game. So
well, I'm glad you can see where I'm going with this.
The fact that you're asking me with that tone means it's not the full game. How much are you getting?
Yeah, for those who may not be aware, the Final Fantasy VII game was broken up originally into 4 discs for the original PlayStation, because of just how big the game was and the video files and things like that, right? You get the content effectively from the first game, like from the first disc of the 7th game. So if you bought it brand new, you spent $60 on a game that you get 1/4 of it.
Ooh.
It's like, is that fair? It's like another thing that makes me even more mad.
Are they planning to update the rest of the game through
that you have to pay for?
Just like regular updates, or are those going to be DLC?
It's DLC
for like money.
It is DLC you have to pay for.
Like downloadable content, but that you have to pay for.
And you have to wait.
So for me, the waiting wouldn't be too bad as long as it was like still getting the game. But if it was paid DLC.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's paid DLC. It's paid. You have to pay for it, and it comes out later. And here's the messed up part too. Here's ultimately just the big middle finger.
Okay.
This year it was free on PlayStation Network.
Oh.
So like if you bought the service, you got the first part of the game free. Like I saw
those types of scenarios.
I saw that and I'm just like, that is the most dirty, nasty, fucked up thing. Like, you couldn't put something on there that was good, that was like not like relatively new. Like it had to be that. It's like, really guys, like that was the plan. Like that was the brilliant, idea. It's like, no. Bad, you guys. You guys are bad people. So, okay.
Shall we move on?
Yeah, let's move on to the next thing. What's the time looking like?
9:43.
Okay, cool. All right. The next ones are going to be more shorter, hopefully.
We'll see. We've had sections where we thought were short, that ended up being long, and then we've had the vice versa happen too.
Yeah. So what is the next section?
Essentially the behind the scenes, talking with the programmers and their working environments.
Okay.
So you've discussed a little bit about this already, about, workers, programmers essentially being forced to work on things they might not want to work on, and having time constraints that are not helpful to the working environment.
Mm-hmm.
So what other things really, grind your gears about, the things they have to go through when they develop these games?
I'm gonna go with the fact that they work crazy hours. First of all, that one is one of the ones that I find to be the most ridiculous things ever. All right.
Yeah.
These people, they work very hard to produce some of the things that we love most, right?
Mm-hmm. And it's not an easy job.
And it's not. It's really not an easy job. It's like a very time-consuming. They're away from their families, and they don't get paid an exceptional amount of money. And yet they work 60, 70, sometimes even 80 hours a week. Now,
1.5 full time.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta believe that they love their job to do that, to put their families through that, to put their bodies through that. I mean, like, some of them just sleep in the office for 5 or 6 hours and then work a whole other day. It's like, Jesus Christ, what are you doing here? You know, it's like I just think that, like, those people they deserve so much more attention and deserve so much more than what they're getting. And I would love for somebody to be able to, you know, get a bill or something like that, something to actually speak for these people and their needs. Because, you know, there are many injustices in this world, but for God's sakes, I mean, an industry that is more productive, worth more money than the movie industry, more money than the movies, TV shows, like everything, Hollywood and music combined, you know, video games are worth more, make more. You know, you can't do that. You can't do something better for your programmers. I mean, come on, guys. Like, that's ridiculous.
Now, for the 60 to 80 hour work weeks, is that like when they're on a time constraint, or is that, you know?
You know, the estimates kind of they vary a little bit from what I have learned about that. It does definitely seem like there's a crunch time kind of like ideology, and when it's crunch time, that's when things are really, you know, things kind of go off the rails and they require so much. You know, more. So yeah, I mean, I think that it's not 100% of the time for the higher end, but like the 60-hour work week and 70-hour work week, it isn't unheard of for that to be the norm. You know, I mean, could you imagine, like, you're just like, okay, I'm just expected to work.
I spend a lot of time on my computer, but even I think I'd lose my mind.
Oh yeah, I mean, I would lose it like 100%. Like, I mean, me sit down for more than 2 hours, and it's just I better be doing it. There's a football near my desk. It's actually like right over here somewhere. That I will just like, I'll just start flipping it because like I'm like, I need to do something. Like I can't just sit here.
You need to do something active.
Yeah, I mean, like, we can only do so much, you know. Like, I mean, like, me personally, like, when I research stuff for the show, like, I will be walking around my apartment while reading the books. You know, like, I'm not like just sitting down stationary and just you know, reading. I like to just kind of like pace a little bit. And so yeah, I couldn't be like that. And those guys are like kind of my heroes. And not to mention, like, some of my favorite games. Some people, like, they quit the industry because of this kind of practice, and they develop some of the coolest games ever. I mean, I feel like these people should be celebrated, and they should be appreciated far more than they are.
They gave us something we enjoy and can take part of and can share the experience.
Yeah, I always think of it as kind of like as if, you know, you were like kind of like talking to a grandmother, right? And your grandmother made you some fresh cookies or something like that.
Ooh.
You know, and instead of being like, thank you for these wonderful cookies, you go up to her and go, all right, go back in the kitchen and make me 9 more. It's like, what? No thank you, no respect, just fuck you, get back in there. Like, that's kind of how I feel like a lot of these programmers are treated. And I think it's kind of shitty, and I would love to see it change.
Yeah. We do have a quick question if you're up for it.
Sure. We can do a quick question.
It's from Kyle, and he's put this question to the audience as well. Do you think it's possible to make an open source game that people can update? Like a game that people pay for the license but crowdsource new content?
100%. 100%. That actually gets done a lot. I mean, if I remember correctly, and I could be totally off of there, but the game I'm actually playing right now, Bloodstained, is a game very similar to that.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, it was the guy who developed Symphony of the Night started working on this game, and he ended up, if I remember correctly, he had the whole like community was involved in its development. So he had like a huge following, and like they were all helping out. And then I also think that there's another game called Sonic Mania, which is kind of like it started off as a hack for Sonic and Knuckles, and Sonic 3. If I remember correctly, and it was like the whole community eventually modified it, and then like there was the one guy who was in charge, and then it got developed. So like I think like those kinds of projects can exist. I think that like what you're specifically talking about isn't exactly the same as my 2 examples, but they're very similar. They're the same wheelhouse. Yeah, and I think so. I think the only issue primarily when it comes to certain games is that if you want to make it onto the consoles, then they have to be kind of funded, and a lot of times you have to get funding from like less than reputable places. So some
Or,
places
like those
EA
fundraiser sites.
or GoFundMe. Yeah, that's I think GoFundMe is a lot less. Is a lot better than than going to like say like EA for support. I mean, fuck EA. I mean, honestly, like I openly hate them. Like I have been offered to test games for them multiple times and turned them down. So like,
did not like them, did you?
No, it's a fuck EA. Like no, they're a horrible company. They take advantage of diehard fans. Like no, absolutely not. Will not support them. No way, no how.
All right.
Anyways.
But yeah, there's been a couple of extra comments about games that have taken Kyle's little question into account, and then there's been a conversation in the chat that I've been reading about companies supporting old games versus letting them expire and creating new games instead.
Yeah.
Do you have an opinion on that? Or do you want to save that for a potential return episode?
Well, let's save it for a return episode.
Yeah, sure. Let me.
We have there's some other things. There's some other things I want to. I want to get through.
Yeah.
Before we do too much. All right. So how much time we got? Just
we've got like, if we wanted to keep it to 10 o'clock, we've got only about 8 minutes.
Okay. All right. So we're probably going over a little bit because I want to get at least into. Well, how far do I want to go with this? I want to go to at least talk about console shortages. So we'll end on
next one.
Yeah, we'll end on that, and we'll see how far we go on that. So, all right, you want to briefly jump into what we're talking about exactly?
Yeah, console shortages. I think when I brought up the topic to begin with, we all kind of knew exactly what game console I was immediately thinking about: the PS5. You know, like, as soon as there's only a couple of them and they're pretty much sold out immediately, and it takes forever to even like try to attempt to get one, but by the time they're available again, they're all sold out, like within an hour, if even. And then you've got people, I don't remember the term for it, I don't really want to use it. Okay. But essentially, like, a person will go ahead and buy up several of the consoles and
scalper?
Huh?
I'm talking about a scalper.
Yeah, that.
Scalpers.
Yeah, like, they buy so many of the consoles themselves and then, you know, sell them at a way higher price just because they can, because they're not available anywhere else because of the low quantity.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I get it. It's a working practice. It doesn't mean I have to like it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you there. When it comes to scalping, this is what I kind of feel like, all right? So, I think it should be gone for the most part. And when I say gone, I mean it should be illegal to do what scalpers currently do. I don't think selling, used stuff is a bad thing. I don't even think selling used stuff for a higher price is a bad thing. The part that I have a problem with is a guy basically using a whole bunch of bots, a dozen or more bots to buy a dozen or more consoles, then hike the price up and sell them online. I think that's the part that's illegal. Now, if the guy gets his hands on consoles at like just like any other person and decides to take his console and sell it, I don't have a problem with that part. It's the use of bots, it's the use of being able to buy so much more. I think that in a situation like what's going on with the PS5 and the Xbox, both of the consoles have the same problem.
Wait, what's the particular situation with those ones?
They're the same. The same problem with the PS5 is the same problem with the Xbox, is people don't want the Xbox because it sucks. Like that's, I'm not gonna be like, I said, it doesn't suck. It's just got less fun things associated with it. Like it's to be fair, I'm gonna buy one even though I don't like it. I mean, the last one I got was a paperweight, so I mean, like, this probably will be. But
oh my gosh.
But it's still a fine console. All right, it's a fine console for those people out there who want to play Halo, which is the real reason why you buy one. That's it. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm done with this.
Continue.
The problem they both have is that they both use the same chip. The chip, which is basically a very low circulation because of the coronavirus. The factory that was responsible for manufacturing those particular chips essentially wasn't able to meet their quota because most of the workers got sick. And so these consoles that were, were more or less ready to go as long as they had the chip, had to wait till the chips. Now they're on back order and they're slowly getting the chips out, and so it's just taking time to basically get them to the various consoles. The thing that I think is problematic is that Sony and Microsoft both knew this was going to happen in advance. What they should have done was they should have gone to the various retailers and said, hey, put together a list. People who pay money down for the console get their name on the list, and each customer is limited to one per household, and then you basically go through the entire list, and by that point every family,
like for the Tesla,
exactly like a Tesla, all right, and then basically you go down the list based upon first come first serve and who put money down, until essentially the console shortage would more or less, it wouldn't be as bad. It still would be bad, it just wouldn't be as bad as it is now.
And because you'd still, even if you got your name on the list, you'd still have the waiting.
Yeah, because even if so it came out last year in November, all right?
Yeah.
There's no reason to expect that by 6 months later you wouldn't have a console if you paid for it that day, considering the number of consoles that have been sold so far. So if they had adopted a system similar to that, every family that wanted one would at least have one.
And then a lot less chance for, one person to just buy a bunch.
Exactly, because scalpers create a problem in and of themselves, okay? And here's the reason why scalpers are bad, all right?
Okay.
Let's ignore the inflated price and understand that that's just capitalism. So if you don't like it, go somewhere else. That's just part of it. That's to me isn't the actual problem, as much as the safety to the buyer, to the consumer. Because let's say hypothetically you spend that exorbitant price, that's $600, $700, $800, even $1,000 for one of these consoles, right? And it doesn't work. What do? Do you contact your scalper and be like, hey, you sent me a defective console, give me my money back? The guy would laugh at you. Like, you're not getting your money back, you got your console. Like, who gives a shit, kind of thing. And while they can say they have a 30-day money-back guarantee, they're not a store. They don't actually have to hold up to that particular thing unless they sign some sort of legal document, which very few of them do. Especially on the these OfferUp site and like eBay. You have to look through the fine print because sometimes it'll seem like it says that, but really it doesn't. So you don't really have protection there. Versus if you had bought your console from a box retailer, you have X number of days to go, oh, it didn't work. It was defective. I don't actually think I need this console. I want to return it. Like, you have options. Now, obviously, if you wanted to return it, you'd probably be better off selling it in the secondary market because you get more money out of it. But the whole, if it doesn't work part, that part really matters. And that's the part that I think is screwing people when it comes to this and why I have a problem with it. But what do you think about that?
To me, it's like, it's not a practice I'd like to take a part in. Just because it's like, people can barely afford to buy just the console at the regular pricing sometimes, so the fact that scalpers can price them that far, it's just like, it's kind of disappointing. And because it's like, I feel that games just add a certain amount of joy. It's a type of entertainment. It's a way to bring family members together. I know that's how I met a bunch of my friends, through gaming, so I'm grateful for games being a part of my life because it's introduced me to so many people. So the fact that people can, take advantage of others just because they want to profit for something that should bring happiness and joy is just... I'm probably not making sense.
No, you're making perfect sense to me because I think you're right. Yeah, when it comes down to it, like video games are supposed to bring joy. They're an art form. They're a form of entertainment. They, they're supposed to do that. That's actually, in my particular opinion, that's the normal response that I think anybody should have when it comes to a game. To me, it's the healthy response. And I think that today, that's just something that gets lost in whatever the hell people are, doing. With their, I don't want to say with their lives, but I mean, like,
it's like some people, take this joy and make it their job. Streamers, especially YouTubers, Twitch streamers, other streamers on other platforms, they've made the gaming their work, and if they have fun with it, that's great because they're doing what they love, and that's more than I can say for a good portion of people. So it's like wonderful. But for those who have their joy essentially taken away, whether it be because of the pressures of the gaming world, because of the pressures of microtransactions making it so that the only way you can actually have fun is through microtransactions, or even, having to essentially fight for a console, it's just all these factors together. It just makes video games less enticing, and that's just sad for me because, again, I've made so many friends through games and I want others to have that experience too, and people are making it kind of difficult now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
By Frog.
By Frog.
I'm like paying attention to you while I'm being attacked by a frog.
No, you're good. I barely understand if any of what I'm saying is making sense.
No, it makes perfect sense to me, honestly. I think that sounds correct. But okay, all right. I think we're gonna end it more or less here. When it comes to things, I would like to know before we end the actual episode itself. Is there anything in the chat that we should take a look at?
Yeah, give me a moment so I can. So they finished their conversation about, making a game and crowdsourcing and the content. And then when we were talking about, scalpers, the console shortages, one of them's just the horrors of supply and demand, and get a Switch, it's portable.
I have a Switch.
Get a Switch, it's portable. But yeah, it's just this entire conversation. A lot of what I've read that we weren't able to get to would probably be a couple questions we'd like to cover in a potential return episode, if people want a return episode. Okay.
Well, we'll let the viewers decide if they want to see it or not. And if you guys aren't able to catch the actual live stream, if you're watching this, this recording in the future, we'll be happy to. What's it called? Look at the comments, and we'll get something or two response to you guys at the very least. So yeah. Well, I think that's gonna do it for us. I hope you guys had fun, and look forward to seeing you guys all in the next one. Later.